Okay, here in part 2 of the Mystery Regen. You know, this thing came into my hands last year, and I heard about the radio. I was thinking, do I really want to drive down to Massachusetts, like an hour and a half drive, see what this thing is? How much is the guy going to charge? You know, do I really need another radio project? They're piled up around here. I have plenty of projects for the channel, that's for sure. Getting this little radio is turning out to be quite an adventure in itself. I think we got something pretty special here. So now, reverse engineering. What is reverse engineering? That means you're taking someone else's design. It might be an alien design in a totally different language with someone that has totally different training than you have, and maybe he's using more advanced or less advanced techniques, but anyway, techniques that you're not familiar with. And you're trying to find out what's in that guy's head. How was this designed? What is the circuit? Can I actually draw the schematic so I can figure out what's going on in it? That's what this video is about. We're going to take this receiver apart and figure out how it's built and come up with a schematic by the end of the video. So we do know a few things about the receiver. Just looking at the parts, we can tell the era of the parts is middle 20s. They already are using fairly advanced style variable capacitors. It's using the standard 201A tube that's so popular. The use of plastics, the Formica and the Bakelite, using those types of plastics, again, places this squarely in the 20s, where there are a lot of radio components that are already developed. It's quite a mature manufacturing system. Distribution is in place, mail order is in place, and radio shops are springing up all around the country. Repair shops are springing up all around the country. Radio is really a craze in the middle 20s. Everybody wants a radio. And it really happened faster than the adoption of those cell phones we have, okay? We're talking in the space of 10 years, we went from nobody knew really what radio was to everybody wanting one in their home or on their farm. So that's pretty quick adoption. Certainly the worldwide adoption of radio was one of the great technological leaps that proves that people can accept technology very, very rapidly. So let's take a closer look at the components and see if this gives us any more hints on what we're looking at here. So looking down on the set, we certainly see the Keras harmonic audio transformers beautifully presented here. This is what gave me the hint that maybe this is a Keras kit or Keras sponsored. Turns out the tuning capacitors are also Keras build. These are basically straight line capacitors. The knobs on the front need to be tightened up, and all the lube and all the stuff that needs to be done on this radio hasn't been touched yet. Let's look at some of the components and see if we can identify some of the other ones. This component here, I don't know if you can see it properly. Let's get in there. You guys see this component right here? That is a radio frequency choke. Okay, so we've identified that as a choke. Over here, we have what appears to be a trimmer capacitor. This presumably is the RF stage. Why would you need a trimmer capacitor and a choke in the RF stage? That doesn't sound right. We're going to find out about that. But I have a hint that what we're looking at is neutralization components. Neutralization of the first RF amplifier stage. These guys were pretty smart, so I assume they had neutralization in that stage before going into the regenerative detector. And you can't see them very well, but I see two rheostats here. It's common practice in this era to have a rheostat for the detector and RF amplifier, and a separate rheostat for the audio amplifiers, one being your RF gain control and the other being your audio gain control, all controlled through the filament Also, you see how that tube is wiggling? If we look down on those sockets, we find out those are made by the Benjamin Company. Those are anti-vibration sockets. Having feedback, you can have radio feedback, you can have audio feedback through electronics in a circuit and the bypassing, or you can have physical vibration feedback. All of those will cause the radio to make strange noises, to howl, and you want to defeat that, and they use those high-cost tube sockets. Pretty cool stuff. By the way, let's pull a tube. Now, if I pull this RCA tube right here, yeah, it's a Radiotron. This is an RCA Radiotron UX201A. That's the correct period type. Of course, it's got the patent on the bottom. Introduced in the very early 20s, and they were used in radios by just about all of the manufacturers, replacing the earlier tubes. Here's another tube over here. Let's remove that. Now, this one's interesting. This is also a Radiotron 201A, UX201A, but it says bought February 25th, 1930. So this tube is a replacement. It's a replacement tube. So interesting. This would be placing the radio sometime in the mid-20s, I would imagine, if this is a replacement. Maybe I'm grasping at straws. I don't know. See if I can get that back in the socket. Okay, that one was easier. We have these couplers. Remember we mentioned the couplers, having the eccentric 45-degree type coupling mechanism as the variocoupler. So I imagine that this is the variocoupler system for the front end, and this is the variocoupler system for the regenerative stage. Both of them tuned. Both of them appear ganged. That's really interesting. And finally over here we have the power inlet. Let's turn the set over carefully. Okay, I'm not going to go too far, but I can see the grid leak system here, right? You have the grid leak resistor and capacitor. That's high-quality mica capacitors. I see a fixed resistor over here, probably in the filament line. A couple of those. And I see what could be a bypass capacitor, I suppose. Here's a couple of terminals that say tel. That's where you put your telephone. No, that's where you put your speaker or your headphones. So there is no output transformer. There's no output transformer on this set. You attach directly to an external transformer or to headsets. So that's about all we can learn, but that's a good start. I think we are indeed looking at an RF stage, a regenerative detector, and 2 stages of audio. Of course, 2 stages of audio because we have 2 interstage transformers. So let's get a little deeper into this. Let's talk about tubes just a little bit, or valves as we call them in His Majesty's kingdoms. This is really beautiful. Notice that this is an Eveready Raytheon tube, and this is labeled ER201A. And it says Raytheon in here. I don't know if you can read that or not. Eveready Raytheon. Very nice. You'll notice that the tube has this silver coating on it. Does anybody know what that is? Well, these tubes have a thorium-coated tungsten filament. And that filament is what discharges the electrons. And that promotes amplification and, rectification through the tube. Now, when they pull the vacuum on these tubes, they don't get everything out. You'd like a perfect vacuum. But they don't get a perfect vacuum all the time. So they put something inside called getter. And the getter is there to remove dangerous gases that would coat that thorium tungsten filament and cause it to have poor emission or less electrons coming off the filament. So in order to get rid of, the bad gases, and what's the worst gas? The worst gas really in the world is oxygen for causing problems with all types of conductivity. And oxygen is very, very reactive. It's reactive in the human body, in fact, causes us to age and degrades our system. So it does the same thing to tubes. So in order to get rid of oxygen and some other damaging gases, you want to have something in there that absorbs those molecules and those atoms and keeps it away from the filament. And that's called getter. Now the getter that they're using here is magnesium. And as you can see, magnesium is very, very shiny. It's a very shiny material. So just for comparison, this is a type 10 power tube. Okay, it's a type 10 family tube. You notice it doesn't have that shiny stuff on it. Now it does have some down below that you can see, but it's nothing like what you have on these. Why would you not want the shiny stuff on a power tube? That's right, because it's like a mirror and it would reflect the heat of the tube right back into the plate structure, and it would pretty soon the plate would be glowing red hot and the tube would fail. So you don't want that heat being reflected back into the bulb. You want it to escape. So that's why we don't use magnesium in power tubes. We use other metals. One popular metal is barium. Aluminum is sometimes used. There's a variety of boutique getter materials that are used for power tubes. But these original O1As and older tubes almost all use magnesium for their getter.
So where are we? I've been doing research on the state of radio technology in the mid-20s, and this has really paid off. The 1920s were an age of radio and automotive extremes. Technology acceptance was very rapid, and with the sudden prosperity of the early 1920s, radio was a real craze. Endless radio-related publications sprang up worldwide. These included radio and wireless technology books, papers, magazines, periodicals, lots of patents, advertisements, some of which were preserved in repositories, maybe your attic. More and more are available online. Magazines like Hugo Gernsback, Radio News, Radio World, Radio Age, Wireless Age, and Popular Wireless, and on, set manufacturers soon were wholesaling to radio stores, and a healthy mail order business sprang up too. Flashy ads sold finished sets, radio parts, and lower-priced radio kits. You may remember that in that first video, I had guessed that the manufacturer might have put together this mystery Regen as a radio kit. I had guessed Karas Electric of Chicago. At the time, I didn't even know if Karas had offered kits. I just saw their fancy audio transformers. Okay, back to our specimen. Reverse engineering of the mystery Regen will involve actually buzzing out the circuit and drawing a schematic. But this can be a tedious process. If you've ever attempted drawing a schematic just by looking at a circuit board, you know what I'm talking about. My thoughts were to start with some assumptions on the basic circuit type and go from there. By 1924 to 1926, which is our best guess at the era that this set was constructed, and with only 4 tubes, that's 4 valves for His Majesty, and period parts and construction materials, there are really only 3 probable architectures. 1, a simple 2-stage TRF with a grid leak detector and 1 stage of audio. 2, a reflexive TRF receiver. That's 1 or 2 amplifiers doing double duty as RF and audio amplifiers, and then a grid leak detector. And 3, a tuned radio frequency stage, a tuned regenerative detector, and 2 stages of audio. Certainly superhets existed at this time, but a superheterodyne took upwards of 6 tubes. So that topology is really out for this receiver. After a quick look around and seeing 2 tuned RF stages, a regen detector, and 2 stages of audio, it kind of looked like the controls could do double duty with an inner and outer concentric design, so that could handle the input coupling and regen control with the same 2 knobs. So I really had a working schematic of that standard architecture to start with. And most of my buzzing work would be checking connections rather than starting from scratch. But before I grabbed my meter and dug in too deep, I wanted to look at the literature and see if Keras Electric, who we know did transformers, the variable capacitors, and they had their name even on the knobs, or perhaps Benjamin, they're the people that made those soft damping tube sockets, might have had an advertisement showing this radio as a kit. So doing my research, poring through various radio magazines, it did not take too long to hit pay dirt. Yes, Keras was an active radio component manufacturer out of Chicago, and they were growing and moving to larger facilities like any successful startup. And yes, they made variable capacitors and specialized vario couplers too, and special vernier dials that they called micrometric dials. All of these parts were special variants, but they basically represented very recognizable components found in any radio receiver of that day. Then, bang, I finally found a kit they made in a mail order catalog, the Randolph catalog. Then I started finding ads and articles in the radio magazines. It turns out they were a major player. I found the TRF-5 tube job that they called the 2-dial equamatic in both articles and print ads first. The equamatic variocoupler transformers were some kind of special patented system along with the straight-line variable capacitors. When linked together, this novel implementation kind of put the coupling in the variocoupler rotor winding continuously adjusting as you tune the band. So the novel implementation was that the coupling in the variocoupler rotor winding was continuously adjusted as you tuned the band to provide maximum coupling and Q. This is essentially frequency optimized coupling all through the band. This is a guarded technique supposedly protected by something called the King patent. As you can see, it takes the 180-degree variocoupler idea and builds onto that.
Okay, so now we have a little situation. What's going on with these variocouplers? Now, over here on the TRF side, we've got the equamatic coil. As you can see, it looks a lot like any 180-degree variocoupler, okay? But the difference is you can adjust this coil. See how I'm adjusting it? I can adjust that angle. That's the equamatic part of it. So by getting that angle right, that's how you can optimize the coupling over the frequency range. So that's the, I guess you'd call this the 2-inductor version of the equamatic coil. And that's all you would need on an RF stage is just 2 windings, a primary and a secondary. The primary usually being the equamatic coil. The secondary that you tune is the stator. Now these are at about 59 degrees. You actually get less coupling at that coupling angle than you would if the 2 coils were at right angles. If you don't believe that, I'm going to show you a diagram. And you can see that the magnetic lines are less when you're at that 50 degrees compared to being 90 degrees apart. It's not straightforward, but that's why all of those coils are at that odd angle you see in the old Nutridynes. Now let's go over to the regenerative stage just to see what they're doing here. This similarly has the adjustable coil, that's on a hinge. I can see it. See, I can adjust that. And that is slave to the capacitor. But it's got an added, I'm going to call it a tertiary winding that can be adjusted with a hinge. I have no idea what that's all about. They do not use this on the equamatic 5-tube receiver. They are using it here on the Regen. So I would suppose that we're looking at the tickler coil and the input coupling coil. That's why this equamatic coil is a 3-inductor style. It has 6 leads rather than 4 leads on this one. So now we kind of understand the product. Let's go back to the equamatic receiver, which is the 5-tube receiver. We'll get back to this Regen quickly.
So that rotor coil, the smaller primary winding, typically used in the plate circuit of TRF stages, can be set at various angles in relation to the stator. The rotor, being linked to the tuning variable capacitor, thus allows the coupling to be optimized over the entire AM band. That's 200 meters to 500 meters, or 500 to 1500 kilohertz. The input variocoupler primary rotor is adjusted for properly coupling to the antenna, so theoretically this provides critical coupling over the whole range. Generally, the primaries on the equamatic variocouplers of the TRF stages are adjusted so the coupling is loosened as the frequency is increased. This preserves Q across the whole band, and you get great selectivity. The input primary would also be adjusted, loosened as the frequency is increased, but in some antenna types, according to the manual, it may have to be reversed. Note that the second and third variable systems are ganged together, so only one dial is required for those 2 stages. Thus, 3 tuning stages are controlled by only 2 dials. That's how it gets its name, the equamatic 2-dial, or the 2-dial equamatic. All of this takes some builder adjustment, and it's very apparent that these sets were expressly marketed to experimenters who are after really good performance. These are not for the casual listener. One oddity was that the input tuning chokes that Keras called equamatic retard coils. Equamatic retard coils? No, you're a Keras equamatic retard coil. No, you are. These chokes, working with the bypass capacitor, act as a negative feedback injection point on the TRF stages. Feedback comes from the plate circuit neutralization or balancing capacitors. This circuit has my attention, since this method of neutralization is new to me. It's quite novel. There's no center tap. Could this Keras trick be the germ for the famous Collins-Brune neutralization that came in the 1950s expressly for 6146 tetrodes? And the supposed dual control knobs are in fact those Keras vernier dials called the micrometrics. The entire parts list is either some clever Keras named part or parts from some of the big names. This is all excellent quality stuff. The filament rheostats off the standard 6-volt storage battery of the day acted as the audio and the RF gain control for the set. After digesting all of this, I chanced across the Knickerbocker 4 ad, Pay Dirt. This is exactly what our mystery receiver is. 4 tubes, a TRF stage, a Regen stage, and 2 stages of audio. This Knickerbocker kit came out in 1926. I think I found it. But the Knickerbocker 4 build layout was completely different than our specimen. It's built conventionally, with stages in line. It's more radio correct. What we're looking at in our build is kind of an art layout. It's very symmetrical. But the schematic, that looks absolutely correct, or at least it's very close. The tuned RF amplifier has that same radio frequency choke idea with that same neutralization trimmer off the plate. So again, the layout is different, but the schematic looks exactly right. So our mystery Regen perhaps is an early kit, or maybe even the missing father prototype. I never found anything that looks like it in any catalog or magazine in my research. This is not to say it does not exist, so next it's time to take this schematic and try to match it up to the set. First, I'll do some mechanical work. I'm going to go over the dials and linkages, the wiring connections, clean and lube the contacts, tube sockets, shafts, all of that stuff. And then we'll see if we can get this thing to match up to the schematic.
So I am gobsmacked. I'm amazed. How is it that we happen to be going into this automatic regeneration control on the channel? It's been something that I've been thinking about for probably 6 months. We have kind of a benefactor who is volunteering to do a circuit board of an automatic regeneration receiver. Suddenly, I have to fill in a couple weeks with videos, and I decide, well, may as well do this regenerative radio I picked up last year. Let's see where it is. You know, it's a regen, so it kind of fits in with the video series. Let's just see what happens. But then you find out that this particular receiver is experimenting with automatic regeneration control. So how is it that a receiver that's 100 years old comes into our video series here in the 21st century just like it was inserted by somebody? Now, of course, I'm not talking about supernatural or hooky-pook, but there are people that believe that there are simulations that represent our very existence. And somebody pushed a button and stuck this radio in front of me so that we run into it during this series. Other people believe that it's the radio fairies. You know, maybe Edwin Armstrong is out there. His ghost is affecting things here on the channel. And of course, you know, there's always Lady Luck. It's just dumb luck. Dumb luck that this radio came, showed up at the right time. I happened to select this radio for the video, and it just happens to be a company that's experimenting with automatic regeneration control. So what do you think? Is this kismet, or is this extraterrestrial, or perhaps heavenly support? There might be a radio angel out there helping me on this channel. I hope you guys are enjoying this series. Next, we're going to actually apply power, figure out how to apply power, voltages, and we're going to see if we can get something to come out of this set. Everybody is waiting for part 3.